I was oh so close to recording this show on Sunday morning, but I just had this feeling in the back of my head. There was something lurking in the shadows, something we needed to wait on, and boy, oh boy, was your boy right. Welcome into the Spring Blake College Football Show. Today is Monday, October 27th. On today's show, we are going to say our goodbyes to our not-so-dear friend Brian Kelly. We will talk about potential fixes for the LSU program, some names that are being discussed in the coming hours of Brian Kelly's departure. We will recap a chaotic weekend of college football, specifically in the SEC, because that's what this show is. It's not supposed to be hot seat talk every Monday. It's supposed to be recapping football on a field. So we'll get to all of that. We will also have a whole lot of fun while we are doing it. If you are tuning into this show for the first time, first of all, welcome. This is your favorite ball knower's favorite ball knowing show. We talk college football, and that's about it. If you are on the YouTubes, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. What was your favorite happening of the weekend? I got to give some shout outs to the YouTube people. You guys have been good to us. You know, last few shows, the views, they've been up. The subscribers, they're up a couple. I think we're up to 25. You know what 25 is? It's more than 0. It's more than 24. I appreciate all the support you guys are giving me, and we're going to keep this thing rolling. So if you're on the YouTubes, please continue to show that support. Just hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you are listening, Spotify, Apple, I still love you. You're still my friends. Thank you for supporting the show there. Leave a 5-star review, subscribe to the channels. Also head over to the socials if you're on Twitter, if you're on TikTok, at SpringBlakeCFB. You see stuff from this show, stuff that goes beyond this show, my other hobbies in the world. This past weekend, it was another EDM show. Went and saw Tape B in Nashville. He threw down. It was electric. If you like lasers, if you like good music, I got some videos up there. So it's my other hobby. Let me live my life outside of college football. But again, wherever you're supporting this show, I appreciate you guys supporting it. All right, so for the third Monday in a row, we now start our show with some news on the coaching front. As I mentioned, LSU has fired Brian Kelly 3.5 seasons in, following his third SEC loss in 4 games, that being to Ole Miss on the road, Vandy on the road, Texas A&M at home. And what everyone knew to be true when this pairing was first made took 3.5 years to fix. Everyone knew that this was not the right fit between the coach and the program. Everyone knew except for the coach coming in and the athletic director hiring him, apparently. But the decision gets made 3.5 years in. Look, Brian Kelly was never a guy that took the LSU job because it was LSU. He took it for the money, something I cannot blame him for, and the move up the career ladder as he gets into the SEC. This was the next step for him, the next leap in his career. Okay, I've been doing well at Notre Dame. What is my next move? Oh, well, the SEC job is open and they're giving me a fuck ton of money, so why not take it? And because he never took it because it was the LSU job, he immediately kicked everything that was Louisiana out of the program, letting go of staples within the organization, just disabandoning all of the identity that this program has had throughout the history of its program. And then despite doing that, he still talked to the fans and the media like he was someone that was trying to fit in, which everyone knew from the start. Like that first press conference where he puts on the Southern accent or he's talking at the basketball game, it's like, what is this? What are we trying to do? It was so unnatural and never a fit that made sense. And that played out over the course of 3.5 years here. We all knew it was bogus and fake from the moment it happened, and it only continued to get worse as the years passed. Now, I'm someone here with 25 subscribers. I'm not someone that's got inside sources, friends in the program. I don't have any of that stuff. But if you listen to anybody talk over the last 24 hours, anybody with significant influence in this sport, they're all saying the same thing. You know, Josh Pate immediately took to a microphone Sunday night and talked about how unpleasant it was to be a staffer at LSU, how Brian Kelly was taking naps at the beach during pivotal parts of the offseason. Despite everyone knowing there needed to be change, he refused to make it. And it doesn't even just take sources to say that. I mean, watch that game against Texas A&M when Brian Kelly is ripping into every single coach he could find. Special teams, offense. You even saw him getting into it with Blake Baker toward the end of it. Like, Brian Kelly was just pointing fingers at every point of the way. Meanwhile, he didn't look in the mirror and say, what am I doing wrong here? Whether it be from a leadership perspective or the work I'm putting in the offseason. What am I doing wrong here to make this work? He treated LSU as a program that was almost a vacation to finish out his career as an older guy. When LSU is at its best, it is one of the few programs in the country that is always a perennial contender for not just national titles, conference titles, and because of that, Brian Kelly fell immensely short of his expectations. And maybe he didn't expect to do that. Maybe he just thought he was going to take a check and ride this out and win 8 games a year, and that would be fine. But you can't do that at a program like LSU. You cannot treat it as just, I'm going to take it easy here, relax on my money. Hopefully we win some games, but at the end of the day, I don't really care. That's the general vibe that you got out of Brian Kelly through 3.5 seasons. And that's something that makes this next hire so important, and a very necessary correction here for Scott Woodward, the athletic director, who unfortunately is on a really bad run of hires. His last 2 hires he's made as head coach, Brian Kelly, now with a $53 million buyout. Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M was his hire before that. Scott Woodward and the team that is going to make this next hire has to be aware of the type of character and personality the next coach is going to come in with. It has to be someone with passion, someone with a fire and a youthful energy that can immediately correct the stale and tired issues that Brian Kelly infused this program with over the last few seasons. You need someone who is going to treat LSU like the dream job it is, not just another job with a big salary. And fortunately, you are a program where 90% of candidates will treat it as such. And maybe it's even higher. Maybe the one guy in this sport that wouldn't treat it like that is Brian Kelly. I truly believe in this hiring pool, you are going to find the right guy because you are LSU. Now, as we talk about potential fits, I talked about one last week that got some waves on TikTok, and maybe you're here because of that. I manifested a world last week where Dan Lanning makes his return to the SEC as the lead man at LSU. Now, people told me all the reasons it wouldn't happen. People told me why they loved it. Now we're here and the first part of the job is done. Brian Kelly is out the door, and LSU can call on anybody because they are a program of such stature that you have to make the best of the best say no. And Dan Lanning will be on that list. I know it might not be the most likely job in the world for him because he is making so much money at Oregon. He seems to love it. He did turn down Alabama a few years ago. A lot of people seem to not get that point straight when they were talking to me or replying in the comments. Dan Lanning made it clear he wasn't taking the Alabama job. People were like, well, Alabama didn't offer him. They had conversations, and Dan Lanning made it clear, and so Alabama moved on into another direction. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. I still believe that Dan Lanning, to me, is the best fit for LSU when you talk about the physicality he gets out of his football teams, the way they can run the football, but also have explosive pass catchers through the air, the way his defense plays every single year, the way they're built in the trenches. Dan Lanning in LSU, that will be what I said, a coach that turns it into a perennial national title contender year in and year out. So Dan, my top guy. We obviously have to talk about some of the other fits. Lane Kiffin, another perfect fit here, should be the first, target to me after Dan Lanning, although he probably will be one of the first calls they make this offseason. He knows the conference well, has continued to win at a place where winning shouldn't be that easy. And there's going to be this really interesting triangle here as we get closer to the end of the regular season because LSU should want Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin should want LSU. Florida should want Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin should also want Florida. Ole Miss definitely wants Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin has really enjoyed his time at Ole Miss. So there's going to be this really interesting, not bidding war, but tug of war between these three programs. Lane Kiffin came out this afternoon, I believe, Monday afternoon, and said that this was not going to come down to a money thing, which is very interesting to pick up on because if you hear that, it seems like Lane is going to prioritize winning. And if you're doing that, to me, Ole Miss is third on that list. That being said, I do want to say in regard to Lane Kiffin that he is a dude that beats to his own drum. He does not care about what you think he should do or what you want him to do. He's gonna do Lane. Lane throughout his career has made bold decisions, weird decisions that don't make sense at the time, but then make sense years later. Like, Lane is always figuring things out his own way. And because of that, I don't want to sit here on Monday afternoon and rule out Florida for Lane Kiffin just because LSU has opened up. He is a Florida guy at heart. I believe his in-laws still live in the state of Florida. He's spent a few years coaching at FAU. Like, Lane is a Florida fit. Now, he could do just as well, maybe even better at LSU, but I don't want to sit here and say, like, oh, Florida lost their top guy because LSU opened up. No, Lane, I think they're close enough where Lane would still consider some of the things that Florida has to offer for him, maybe on a personal side of things that LSU can't in this moment. So that's one thing I'll say with Lane. LSU, sure, it might be the better job. I think Lane isn't going to solely base his decision off of that. I think it's going to be a mix of personal life stuff and professional stuff. I still would put Ole Miss at 3 in the running chart there, just because I think, he spoke this year about how it's been tough to get home field crowds for lesser games. That Wazoo game, he was really pissed about the fans afterward. LSU and Florida are not places like that. And if it's not coming down to money, that means it's not going to take $15 million at Ole Miss to stay. But if the money is competitive at Florida and LSU and the opportunity to consistently win national titles is there, I think he's going to take one of them. I think he's going to choose Florida. If I just had to say, like, gun to head, pick between Florida and LSU, if he is given both of those options, and maybe he's not, maybe LSU goes a step above Lane, whatever that ends up being, because I've heard every name under the sun. I heard Joel Klatt say Nick Saban and Urban Meyer. I heard him say Dan Lanning, which is something I'm of the opinion of too. I would personally go Dan Lanning over Lane Kiffin. But regardless, I think there's going to be some personal things that pull Lane to Florida as opposed to LSU. Is it the right move? Time will tell. But that's just the feeling I get sitting here at the end of October. So those are the top 2 guys. There's a whole other list of names that you're hearing, and that's what LSU really is. Like, LSU is that program that you knock on every single door of every top coach in this sport, old, young, G5, Power 4, like wherever you can find the best coaches in this sport, LSU is going to make that call. So we already mentioned Dan Lanning. We've already talked Lane Kiffin. Marcus Freeman is another guy, just like Lane Kiffin, who could do tenfold the success that he's done at Notre Dame with recruiting, transfer portal, financial backing that LSU would provide him with. He is unbelievable as a head coach. The stuff he's done at Notre Dame, despite some of the limitations they have academically there and getting kids into the program, is a tough thing to do. He's been fantastic. The players love him. I know you would be going right back to the Notre Dame well with this hire after bringing in Brian Kelly a few years ago, but he is such a different fit. He's such a different person than what Brian Kelly is. I watched back today the video when the Notre Dame players learned that Marcus Freeman was going to be their new head coach, and the way that they responded to him in that moment, and really every moment since, tells you all you need to know about Marcus Freeman. He is a player's coach. He represents each brand well. He's also 39 years old, I believe. Let me see. Yeah, 39 years old. He relates to the players and the fans far better than Brian Kelly was ever willing to. Is just such a good dude and a good fit that you'd want to attach yourself to him for the next 15 to 20 years. So he obviously, he's got a great situation right now. You still have to make him say no if you're LSU. Kenny Dillingham, another really interesting name that's popped up. Now, he's obviously enjoying his life at his alma mater. He's talked about how it is just like the perfect fit for him. It does fit him well. But again, this is a school that doesn't come around knocking once. And if, Alabama hires Kalen DeBoer and Kalen DeBoer ends up to be the guy, Alabama has its head coach for the next 15 to 20 years. When these jobs open up, you have the opportunity to solidify yourself as the guy at the program for the next decade plus if it goes well. And those opportunities don't come around often. Ohio State's got Ryan Day locked up. Texas, Sark could be there for the rest of his life if he wants to. If Kalen hits, he'll be at Alabama for a while. LSU is like one of those teams where if you get it right, you're going to stay around for a damn long time. So I know Kenny is doing great in the Big 12. I think he'd be great at LSU. He's obviously got the energy and the enthusiasm that would, reignite this program that, as I mentioned, has felt a little stale under Brian Kelly. He's also one of the more brilliant offensive minds in the sport. Just 35 years old. Like, that's the thing with him and Marcus Freeman. They're so young. You would attach yourself to the guy, hopefully for the next decade plus, 2 decades. Like, it'd be a long-term fit there. And then the other last one, there's a few actually smaller ones that I'll mention that we've talked about every hire cycle. Joe Brady is a really fun one that's been floated around. So Joe was the offensive coordinator for the Tigers during their 2019 national championship run. He has then gone on into the NFL and had success at a few different locations. I know things didn't pan out for him, and I believe Carolina for a little bit. I'm not sure if that was with Matt Rule or not, but there was a stop in the NFL where it didn't work, but he's really found his footing there in recent years. He's the offensive coordinator for the Bills right now. People think he's up for an NFL head coaching gig this offseason. Would LSU be a little bit more enticing to go back and kind of give it another try as the lead guy? He's still another guy, super young, would be a really fun fit and a nice reunion for some glory days that LSU has had in recent memory. So those are the 5 names. I know everybody's saying the same thing, but Dan Lanning, Lane Kiffin, Marcus Freeman, Kenny Dillingham, Joe Brady, those first 4, you have to make them say no. Like, I that's in the order I'd do it: Lanning, Kiffin, Freeman, Kenny, Brady. You have to call them and make them say no. There's also all the other guys that we've discussed at length these last few weeks as it pertains to the Florida job, the Penn State job. John Summerall feels like a lock to get some type of SEC gig this offseason, whether it's here, he stays in state, goes from Tulane to Louisiana, or he goes to Auburn when it opens up, or Arkansas, or Kentucky when it opens up. John Summerall is going to be an SEC coach at the end of the year. It's just going to be really interesting to see where it ends up landing. Eli Drinkwitz, another guy, kind of like a Lane Kiffin light type, where you feel he'd do well with the opportunity. He'll obviously have to be in the conversation. You've also got Jeff Brom at Louisville, Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, Brent Key at Georgia Tech, guys that are all significantly outperforming expectations for their given programs and doing it for a lot of years in a row. All big names. I still think, like, the top 5, it's coming from that pool. If you go and get one of these guys that I just mentioned on this lower tier, like, it's still going to be a great fit. It might even be, for its money, the best fit. But I think LSU is of that stature, to get the big name. LSU is that program to get the guy. This isn't Florida, who now has to wait for your decision before they can go get their guy. This isn't Penn State, who not only has to now wait for Florida, but also LSU before they can land their guy. You are the epicenter of this potentially sport-altering hiring cycle, and the rest of the world waits your decision. So just make sure you pick the right one, Scott Woodward, because 2 mistakes in a row, that's something that would set this program back a decade, maybe more. That's the thing. You're allowed one fuck up. You're going to be paying Brian Kelly until 2031. The last thing you want to do is add another fat buyout onto that 3 years from now. So good luck. Your track record says it might not be the easiest thing for you to do, but hopefully you can reflect on the mistakes that went wrong this time around and find a guy that just has a youthful energy, that wants the job because it's LSU, and someone that, is one of the best coaches in the sport. So that is all that I wanted to say about Brian Kelly and LSU. We're going to take a quick break and get into some game recaps.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
So while we are on the news of Brian Kelly and LSU, I think it's only fair to talk about the result that led to his demise. Texas A&M smacked around LSU in the second half of Saturday night's game, en route to a 49-25 victory, their first at Tiger Stadium since 1994, which was also the last time they started a season 7-0. They are now 8-0. What a response out of the second half from Mike Elko's group. LSU, in the first half, got all it needed from the Aggies to keep this thing close at the break. They got 2 Marcel Reed interceptions, one of which I believe was in the red zone. They also blocked a punt that resulted in a safety. You also, on offense, found 3 scoring drives of 6+ plays against what is a good Aggie defense. You go into the break and you're like, whew, man, has LSU found the response? Was this their gut check moment? A switch was flipped, man, at the break. A different Aggie team came out and flattened the Tigers the rest of the way. This was the LSU drive chart in the second half. Punt, 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 turnover on downs, and a touchdown when the game was all but over. A&M, on the other hand, scored on its first 3 drives of the second half, punted just once over the final 30 minutes. Total flip, total domination. Great result for the Aggies. You know, everything that we had concerns about with LSU last week, the week before, the entire 2025 season, the entire 2024 season showed up again in this game for the millionth time. LSU lost the rushing battle 224-60. They went 2 of 12 on third down and were sacked 7 times. It's hard to sit here and talk about big picture stuff for LSU, knowing that their head coach was fired 24 hours after. Like, there's not a whole lot of reflection of what this means for LSU moving forward. For LSU moving forward, the season is probably all but wrapped up. You've got a chance to play spoiler for a few other teams. Some players have the chance to, earn their right to stay at LSU for the new regime or to transfer out elsewhere. This is really all it is outside of like hey, can you throw the kitchen sink at Bama off the bye? Like that's to me the big picture for LSU is like, who can you spoil now? Can you use this decision that seemed to be universally liked by players and coaches probably? Can you use that to enjoy the rest of this season? I'll be very curious to see what this team looks like out of their bye week and to finish out the regular season. As it pertains to Texas A&M, the winner of this game, this team is just on fire, has all the pieces of what you need from a national title contender. The quarterback is dynamic. He can make up for iffy passing numbers, iffy days through the air, with 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground if he needs to, which is what he did against LSU. You've got a handful of difference makers at the skill positions. Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion didn't light up the world through the air this past week, but they still made some huge plays when needed. KC also ran back a punt for a touchdown, a huge momentum swing there for the Aggies. And then you've got a coach that has really done a nice job building out the trenches of this football team, instilling a superb mindset for this program. One of the better offensive lines in the nation. They've got a ton of experience along that group, so it's no surprise the continuity that they have through this point of the season. And their defensive line is ferocious. Cassius Howell is obviously the top name, one of the best edge rushers in this sport, but they're having better sack production this year. Eons better of sack production this season than last year. And last year they had 3 NFL picks in what I believe was the first 2 rounds. So, they have all the makings of a really talented football team here in College Station. You just have to hope that this isn't the peak for Texas A&M. They did this same thing last season, and it really came back to bite them in the ass. Last year, after beating LSU, they made it to 7-1 on the season, and they lost 3 of their final 4 games to close out the year, that being to South Carolina, Auburn, and Texas. Now, this year, they are a much better team this time around. But my feeling about them at this point in the season remains the same. Do not let this be your peak. You cannot be peaking at the end of October. You have to chase the carrot with the same tenacity every single week. You cannot let opportunities like this slip out of your hands. Now, thankfully for the Aggies, for Mike Elko, they just dealt with this a year ago, and a lot of those players on that team are still here this season. I think that can be a really big learning moment for this team, but November can be a real long month, especially when you're sitting pretty at 8-0 and one of the only undefeated teams in college football, but also the only undefeated one in the SEC. So those are my thoughts on LSU, Texas A&M. one more break, and we're going to start rolling through some of these other games in the SEC.
My name's Blake.
All right, so let's keep things moving along. What a game we had in Norman, Oklahoma, where Lane Kiffin picked up a massive road victory over the Sooners. Final score in this one was 34-26. This game was really interesting to me because when we usually talk about Lane Kiffin's offense, it's always about the passing game, the explosives down the field, the trickery. Wow, Lane's really in his bag today. This game, and they had that, but this game was all about the trench play for the Rebels. The Ole Miss offensive line was amazing. Facing up against one of the best defenses in the nation, they found 116 yards on the ground against what was the number 3 rushing defense heading into this week. They allowed just 1 sack in a game where they threw the ball 44 times. Oklahoma had come into this game leading the nation in sack rate. Ole Miss is now the 8th best sack rate allowed in the country. Ole Miss now owns the 8th best sack rate allowed in the country on just 2.55% of dropbacks, which is really, 2.55% is good for any team, but when you pass as often as Lane Kiffin does for this Ole Miss team, 2.55% is really impressive out of this football team. So when you combine that type of protection, with a scheme that brilliantly gets wide receivers open down the field, and then also a mobile quarterback that can extend plays, take off, and run, you get one of the best offenses in the country. And that's where this team is at. Ole Miss there are a few teams in the sport playing better football on that side of the ball than Ole Miss right now. And then hats off to the Ole Miss defensive line, a group that got bullied around by Georgia last week, responded with some massive plays. They had a pivotal safety in the second quarter that led to a field goal on the ensuing drive. Nice 5-point swing there, all because he got into the backfield. They had a huge sack on a 4th and 2 that led to an Ole Miss touchdown right before the half. The Ole Miss defensive line finished with, I believe, 3 sacks on the day. Now, the box score will read that they allowed 136 rushing yards, but 65 of those came on 1 carry, that being a touchdown run in the third quarter. Take out that run, the Rebels allowed just 2.6 yards per carry. So really impressive day in the trenches from Ole Miss. Despite allowing the Sooners to march back in the third, the defense came up big in the fourth quarter, 2 stops in the final 2 minutes to get this team to 7-1. So, again, we think of Ole Miss as this high-flying, high-octane offense. The play that they got from their trenches, both offensively and defensively, it's phenomenal. It was really impressive, especially coming off a game in which they were on the field so much against Georgia. Defensively, I think they were on the field for 80 plays. Offensively, they were running up and down the field for 4 quarters. To take a road trip, to lose that one, to go on another road trip to Oklahoma and respond the way they did. Very impressive, something I was not expecting. And with the win, you're now starting to see the Ole Miss playoff picture start to crystallize. You've gotten through the meat of your schedule. You're sitting at 7-1, that one being a very close loss to Georgia. They should be prohibitive favorites in all of their Final 4 games. That's South Carolina, the Citadel, Florida, and Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl at the end of the year. Now, I did say these same things about Miami a couple weeks ago, and they tossed one away to Louisville the week after. So you can't sit here and just take your foot off the pedal. But whether or not this team lands a spot in the SEC title game, the way the regular season might shake out, there shouldn't be a world in which they don't receive an at-large bid in the postseason. 2 losses the rest of the way would surprise me. I think at worst there's 1, there's probably 0, and Lane will either be playing for an SEC title or receiving an at-large bid into the college football playoffs. So to flip this over to the loser of the game, it's just more of the same that we've gotten from Oklahoma all season now. As I mentioned earlier, 2.6 yards per carry when you take away the lone 65-yard touchdown score. Mateer was sacked 3 times in this game. Their run game is now ranked 83rd in the sport, which honestly I think is a little bit better than it was over the last few weeks, but still one of the worst in the nation. Sack rate allowed, now 90th. Offensive line is just not carrying the weight that it needs to for this team right now. And you can get by like that sometimes with poor production from the run game or the offensive line when you're up against the South Carolinas of the world or the Auburns of the world, where you're going up against teams that also don't have these super explosive and tricky offenses to defend, but not when you're going up against some of the best, more competent, explosive offenses in the nation like Ole Miss is. Because the defense is great. I don't leave this being like, man, Brent Venables doesn't have a good defense this year. No, like, it was great. It just had to do a lot more than it should have had to do this past week. It's not invincible. It's great, but it's not invincible. And now for Oklahoma, a second loss, doesn't mean that the season is over here, but if we just start to play the schedule game, it's going to be really tough, especially when you consider that Oklahoma's issues since week 1 up to this point are still existent. We'll preview the game later in this week. I don't see them being able to beat a Tennessee squad that can put up points on the ground, through the air. They're good enough on defense to where I think they'll have some success against this Oklahoma offensive line. I also don't see them being able to put it on Alabama, who's playing great football offensively as well. If Oklahoma needs to win track meets, I don't think that they're going to be able to do so against those types of teams. And it's just another important reminder when we look at Oklahoma and take a step back. Maybe not even just this week, maybe not even just this season, but kind of this regime here or this era of Oklahoma football. These windows are incredibly tight, man. And it's going to make for a really important offseason here in Norman for Brent Venables. Last year, they had a lot of messes. The offensive coordinator was a mess. The play caller was a mess. The quarterback was a mess. The running backs were a mess. The offensive line was a mess. The wide receivers, injured, still a mess. So what do? You have all those issues. You waste a really good defense. So in the offseason, you bring in Mateer, you bring in Ben Arbuckle, and you get those two fixed, which is really important. It's what's carried them to 6-2. They look so much better than they did last season, but you're still limited because you couldn't fix the running back room despite trying to, and the offensive line has not done its job, as I've mentioned. So now as you head toward the offseason, I hate to be just like putting a bow on Oklahoma's season here, because there is a world where they go and do the unthinkable, run the gauntlet, and have a really impressive 10-2 record by the end of the season. I just don't see that being that likely. That makes this offseason super important. You got to get things on the offensive line figured out. You got to get some capable tailbacks in there, ones that can carry the rock 15 to 18 times a game to where Mateer doesn't need to be this 10 rush attempt guy every day, or he can at least have a little bit of balance, something to rely on if maybe things aren't going great through the air. Maybe it takes some switches at positional coaches. I know that there are a few guys there. I think the running backs coach is DeMarco Murray. I'm not saying that you have to fire him or you have to fire the offensive line coach, but position coaches do need to be adjusted every once in a while, especially after multiple seasons of not having much success in those rooms. So I think this is still a damned good football team. They just have a couple fatal flaws that you're not able to make up for against the best teams in the country. So it's like Oklahoma is a really great team, but they're a really great tier 2 team. And when you go up against Ole Miss or you'll go up against Alabama in a few weeks, those teams just have it more figured out, which is why this offseason is going to be massive for Oklahoma. I need a drink of water. We've got so many games to go. We're going to do rapid fire for some of them. We are going to take one more break, hopefully our last break, but I desperately need some water right now.
Blake. What?
Got to talk about the game out in Columbia, South Carolina. Alabama delivered on some late heroics in this one. Another awesome game in the SEC this weekend. They found 15 points in the final 2 minutes and some change to leave South Carolina with a victory. I'll say this about Alabama. You need to see a game like this from a team that you think has enough juice to win it all. Now, I know Alabama fans, just like each of the last 4 weeks, want the Nick Saban days where they're winning 42-6 and they're just shutting the gates on every single opponent they face. Those days are gone. So with that, just try to enjoy, smile, laugh over results like this one. A game that you shouldn't have won, but your team dug deep and found a way to pull out the victory. The composure from this football team to dig deep in what's a hostile road SEC environment when nothing had been going right through the first 3 quarters shows me so much more than just curb stomping a South Carolina. I like to see my teams tested a little bit. You know, if you were just running the gauntlet, like, yeah, sure, Ohio State looks like the best team in the country. Oregon last season looked like the best team in the country until someone came and just smacked them across the face, and Ohio State put up 52 on them. I like to see my teams have a little gut check moment. This was theirs for Alabama. You know, they executed a 14-play, 79-yard touchdown drive that ate up nearly 8 minutes of clock to tie things up with just a few minutes to go, showed their ability to completely flip a switch, retake control of the game. Really impressive drive. Ty Simpson locked in. Ryan Grubb was awesome down the line there, calling plays for this offense. And yeah, the defense has had its issues in spurts, and this has been the same thing we've talked about with Alabama for every single week. This isn't your vaunted fuck everybody up for 4 quarters that you're used to. But just as they did against Vanderbilt, against Missouri, against Tennessee, they made big plays when it matters. Pivotal forced fumble from Tim Keenan, which set up to the Jeremy Bernard touchdown run to put the game on ice, send the Tide into their bye week at 7-1. This is a really impressive stretch for the Tide. I talked about how this team a month and a half ago was starting to get things rolling. You know, they took care of their lesser competition. They steamrolled Wisconsin. I was like, this team learned from Florida State. Now they got a gauntlet coming up. But man, they handled that. They go into Georgia and pick up a big win. They exercise their Vandy demons and take care of them at home. Then they go to Mizzou and they hang on to win by 3. They take care of Tennessee at home, go to a tough road environment in South Carolina, and take care of that one as well. So 5 straight wins in the SEC, all for the most part really tough opponents. Huge feather in the cap for Kalen DeBoer and this coaching staff. The response and the way that this team has played, the way they play for each other, the way that they can, win by 17 one week, but also pull out a come-from-behind victory like this one, has me feeling really good about this team's odds to handle adversity down the stretch, handle some of the best teams in the nation, and hey, am I attached to them because I picked them to win it all? Sure, but it's nice to see these results happen. Let's keep moving along. Vanderbilt won a dogfight in Nashville this past weekend, pulling away from Missouri late in this game, 17-10. I got to give Vandy their flowers. You know, I haven't been dogging them the last few weeks, but I haven't been riding them. I took LSU last week. I took Mizzou this past week. I just thought they were going to get on track against Vandy. I thought the story was a cute story, but it wasn't legit. I obviously go 0-2 in those. Vandy's defense was something else on Saturday. And I don't mean that to say like they were dominant and ferocious, but they just bent and bent and bent and bent and bent some more, but they never broke. Mizzou won nearly every facet of this game aside from the final score. Mizzou outgained Vandy 376-265 on the day. They ran 33 more plays on offense, won the time of possession by 12 minutes. They were even 4 for 5 on their 4th down attempts. But listen to how all those drives ended. Punt, 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 field goal, punt, turnover on downs. Bo Perbula gets hurt on that one. Obviously changes a little bit of momentum for Missouri there. So they go from the turnover on downs to a missed field goal, touchdown, fumble, end of game. To be as dominant as they were in between the 20s, to get them to be ineffective in the red zone or missing field goals, forcing turnovers, just, like I said, Vandy impressed me in a way that every time they needed to make a big play, they made it, despite Mizzou having a pretty successful day on them for the most part. For Mizzou, it sucks not to just pick up your second loss of the conference slate, to also lose your starting quarterback in the process. I thought Matt Zollers did well enough. Maybe I said that right, Matt Zollers. I thought he did well enough in relief. He throws the Hail Mary. It comes up inches short from sending this game to overtime. We could be having a very different conversation here if he was just 6 inches further back. And as I do that, you probably can't hear me into the mic as well. For Missouri, it does feel like this is going to be another we were almost there type season for Drink at Mizzou, which really is going to start to push the envelope for his next destination because he's a damn good coach, but there are just some limitations with this team. And I'm curious to see if there is going to be a program of higher stature that misses out on a lane or can't pull, a Marcus Freeman out, or they miss their top few guys. If Eli's just sitting there and they're like, you know what, he's doing really well at a place that just keeps running into limitations. And I wonder if Drink is going to start realizing that here. Now, I'm not saying that, they're limited because they lost their quarterback to injury. Those fluky things happen, but they're on a run here now of being like 6-1 to start the year, 7-1. Wow, the offense is great. And then they just lose a couple down the stretch and it sort of flames out. So I think that's what things are heading for with Mizzou. I don't have the rest of their schedule up here, but I know there's at least a game against Texas A&M, another couple of tricky ones in there as well. So I don't see it happening. I didn't really say anything about Vandy big picture here. I'll say this. The most massive game coming up this Saturday against Texas, at Texas, potentially without Arch Manning as he's in concussion protocol. Line's at 1.5 right now. Texas favored by 1.5. And let me tell you, Vandy's a better football team right now. I don't know if they're going to get the win. We'll preview it in a couple of days, but they got a chance to do something special here, man. If they can move to 8-1, you can afford another loss and still get into that, that at-large conversation that we were just having with Ole Miss. Everything is in front of here for Vandy. And I'll just say this, unfortunately for the way this sport works, the more that man keeps winning, the less likely he's going to be around. So hopefully Vanderbilt's got some big pockets to try and make things work here. Clarkley's a damn good coach, and he's doing a phenomenal job with this team. All right, so we got a few more things to talk about. I do want to take a break and just say something about the SEC right now. Everyone loves to complain in the world if you're not a fan of the SEC. They're like, SEC bias, it's unfair the way it gets covered compared to the Big Ten or the Big 12 or even the ACC. The Big Ten's been the most vocal about it recently, and I'm probably just bitching about it because I had so many comments. I posted a video about Dan Lanning to LSU, and I said SEC is college football, and there were so many crybabies. SEC's not college football. Who's won the last 2 national championships? Well, I'll tell you what. The Big Ten right now is delivering us maybe one great game every couple of weeks. Every couple of weeks, I get a good one. I mean, even this week, I would have previewed Ohio State, Penn State. It would have been one of the games of the year. You know what? It's not a game of the year. It's something that won't even get discussed on this show because Ohio State is 20.5-point favorites. The SEC finds us 3 to 4 great games each week. I mean, today's show, we talked about what? We talked about LSU, Texas A&M. Then we talked about Ole Miss, Oklahoma. Then we went to Alabama, South Carolina. We even fit in Vandy, Mizzou before any Big Ten content. Do you want a 10-minute breakdown on Oregon beating Wisconsin 21-7? Or do you want me to spend 5 minutes on Indiana blowing the doors off UCLA? Like, congrats. You got the last 2 national championships. You have had some of the best teams in college football. But when we talk about which conference is the best and how they stack up against one another, there is nothing in this sport that compares to the SEC, man. And I'm not saying that as an SEC homer. I'm from upstate New York. Syracuse was my school. But I have eyes and I have a brain and I watch college football. And you know who delivers on action every single week? The SEC. That has nothing to do with this show. I wanted to rant about it for a little bit. All right, let's finish up with some quick hitters here. We'll talk about the other conferences now to finish out this show. First up, BYU continues to fuck me out of money. They go and wake up in the second half against Iowa State. A couple of big plays there, a nice pick 6. They get a 14-point win over Iowa State. I hope I'm right about them at some point. I hope I come around to them before I have to claim bankruptcy. I mean, every single week this team proves me wrong, and every single week I go back to the well of just fading them. They're 8-0. They look really good despite not looking good. I don't know where it goes, but an impressive win nonetheless over Iowa State. Texas. We do need to talk about Texas. They deserve a little bit more of just like a quick hitter conversation. They stared at a 17-point deficit late in the fourth quarter, pulled a rabbit out of the hat, overtime victory for Texas over Mississippi State. There is something about this Texas offense that seems to flip a switch when they're in desperation mode, and I've spoken about that a few times throughout this 2025 season. I thought Arch played great down the stretch. When they needed him to deliver and step up, he made a few big plays. Obviously, you get lucky with a punt return for a touchdown there that makes a huge swing and just immediately puts you back in it. But I thought he looked great up until getting knocked out with the concussion. There is going to be a really interesting case, or the potential for a really interesting case with Texas, the way the rest of this regular season goes, because I don't know how it's going to go against Vandy. They still have 2 more tough games after that against Georgia, Texas A&M. Like, there's a world where the results play out and we don't have to argue about Texas at the end of the season. But if there's like 1 or 2 at-large spots and they're sitting there as a 2 or a 3-loss team, and the losses are to, Ohio State, who's the number 1 seed in the college football playoffs, and maybe one of them is to Georgia, and they're one of the top at-large bids out of the SEC. And then there's the one to Florida, which is inexcusable, but there's going to be a few teams that also have that inexcusable loss. I'm just saying there's going to be a really interesting conversation about this team and whether or not they deserve to be in the playoffs, despite looking nothing like a team that should be in the college football playoffs. The win-loss record with them is going to be really interesting between now and the end of the regular season. I just joked about it, but Indiana did smoke UCLA. Bloodbath. Terrible. Just another reminder that this Indiana team does not fall into trap games. They treat every opponent like they're an undefeated guy coming into town. So huge win for Indiana. Georgia Tech cruised past Syracuse 41-6, was it? Oh my God, was it 41-6? Holy shit. No, 41-16, I believe is what it was, right? Maybe that's a typo there. Georgia Tech's appearance to an ACC title is like really starting to take form here. We spoke on last week's show when I repredicted it. Now, ball knower. I had Georgia Tech in the conference title game in the preseason. I just flipped it to say they're going to win it this time around. So huge win there over Syracuse. Auburn gets its first win of the SEC schedule, but they get it by Arkansas handing it to them because Arkansas threw away 4 turnovers in the fourth quarter. Auburn benches Jackson Arnold in the second quarter. They pull out a win at the end there. I thought a loss would have ended things for Hugh Freeze. I thought it would have landed him getting fired yesterday if they had lost it. I also don't think, though, that the win is something that is going to keep his job alive here. They still have a pretty tough finish to their regular season. They've got a bye in a couple of weeks. I think the job is over here for him. I think they've reached that point where it's time to move on. But the win over Arkansas just saves him for a little bit here. And then, last thing I'll say is best bets were marginally good to us. 3-2 on the week. We got winners from Washington, Auburn, and Rutgers. On the losing end, we were as wrong as wrong could be with our 2 losses. I took the over in Vandy Mizzou, and just like instant loser. Like, holy shit. I was even praying for a 17-17 overtime where they just started ripping off scores. But I lost that one. Syracuse fucked me by getting blown out by Georgia Tech. We are still I don't have the record here. I'll pull it up on next show, but we are still winning best bets this season. We're up at least 3 or 4 units, I believe, and another winning week here on the Spring Blake College Football Show. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for listening, watching. Again, support this show wherever you can, liking the video, subscribing to the channels, 5-star reviews on the podcast. We'll be back on Thursday. It's a 2-show week. Not a lot of games that really pop out to make it 3-show week worthy, but we'll be back Thursday previewing games of the week, the Spring Blake poll, best bets, and marching closer to, I hate to say it, but like almost the conclusion of a really great regular season. We still got time, so let's enjoy it. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you. I love you, and I'll talk to you in a few days. Peace.